DeAndre Swift is in, Zach Charbonnet is out, and Jaden Daniels is also out. All of it matters, and it all gets settled on Saturdays, which is why I always wait until the end of the week to go through every matchup to find the must-start and sit running backs for any week in fantasy football. So we're doing that for week 3, and I'm one of the only YouTubers working on a Saturday to get you this type of content to help you win. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now get into our first matchup. It's the Cincinnati Bengals at the Minnesota Vikings, the duel of the backup quarterbacks. And there's a couple different reasons why I don't consider either of these backs a must start. Now, I want to start with Chase Brown, who a lot of people naturally are going to be fading after Joe Burrow's injury. And listen, I can understand why we are not as excited about Chase Brown as we were before the season started, because even 2 games with, actually game and a half or so, with Joe Burrow, he hasn't done anything yet. But I will say this, if you just go to fsroundup.com, look at his usage, he's gotten 19 plus opportunities in the first 2 games alone. If he continues to see that type of volume and there's no clear backup taking any work away, which by the way, Samaje Perine's not taking work away, it will break his way. At some point it will. So I do consider him still a better play slightly over Jordan Mason. And I'll tell you the reason why. Obviously, everybody knows that Aaron Jones is out for this game and for the foreseeable future as well, as he got placed on IR with a hamstring injury. But I will say this, the backup over there, Xavier Scott, he's going to get work in this offense. I promise you that. It will be a 2 running back system to a degree in this offense. I do believe that they'll have him involved and Jordan Mason will not see the majority of the work. But of course, just based on matchup, Jordan Mason has a better matchup than Chase Brown. So this is very interchangeable. You could start a poll on this one on fsroundup.com and post live polls and get live results from people. But I am definitely going to be playing Chase Brown over Jordan Mason because he has no competition behind him. The next matchup is the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And listen, neither of these guys are must start either. Like Travis Etienne is right there. Obviously, he's played fantastic, but I will say this, like the Jags have not faced a real test defensively. Last week, they got Cincinnati's defense. Week 1, they got Carolina. Like there hasn't been a real test yet, and I've been saying this all week. I think that the Texans defense will actually possibly crush the Jags because the Jags I think of as a weaker team. We don't need a weak team out there going up against a really tough Texans defense that hasn't won yet. They're going to be mad. They're going to be coming into Jacksonville looking to show them who's boss over the division over the last several years. I expect the Jags to lose this game, and I expect Etienne to have one of his worst games. That being said, he still has been really efficient. He's looked really good, and he's clearly the lead back, so he's a high-end flex option that I would play over Nick Chubb, obviously. But I will say this, again, Nick Chubb, I think this is a good matchup for him. And last week, with the exception of the run against the Bucs that went for a touchdown, he was largely bottled up. And that's why I just can't really say that Nick Chubb is anything more than like a high-ish middle-tier flex option because he's just not running behind a good offensive line. But himself, like, actually looks pretty good, way better than he did last year returning off of the knee injury. I would say that Nick Chubb is definitely playable, and I would say the same with Bashul Tutin. He's definitely taking work away from Travis Etienne, and they've both been efficient, but again, he's a lower-end flex for me this week because I think this matchup is going to be bad. And keep an eye on Woody Marks. Don't put him in your lineup, but keep an eye on him. He got more work last week for the Texans, and I've always envisioned this guy to be their pass-catching back at some point, and it looks like last week, based on that week, it could start to happen soon. The Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans is our next matchup, and Jonathan Taylor, for obvious reasons, is must start. The guy is a freakish guy. I mean, he really is just a stud at this point of his career still, and I do not think that this is the easiest matchup he'll have this year, but I will say that Jonathan Taylor goes nowhere near your bench. Tony Pollard, it's his best week. He is a legitimate high-end flex option. I would play him over Calvin Ridley, who I also like this week, way more than I have all year. The Colts defense, I do think, offers weaknesses for this Tennessee offense to take advantage of. So I do expect Tony Pollard to have a much better game in this Week 3 matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts than he has in the first 2 weeks. And if you just look at the usage on fsroundup.com, you'll see how much work he's getting on a weekly basis. He's basically getting 20 touches per game. I think this is a good week to play Tony Pollard. And I would say nobody else is even relevant in this matchup. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Washington Commanders is our next matchup, and this is an interesting one. I'm very curious to see the results on this one when I put out a poll on FS Roundup. So let's go do it right now. Let's go search up Ashton Genty, and then let's go start a poll right now. So you click on Ashton Genty's player profile, then you go to chat right here, then you click on start a poll, and you set it to week 3. And let's set it Josh Jacobs versus Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt right here. And let's go ahead and post this. And I'm very curious to see the results on this because I'm still going to play Ashton Genty over Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Because again, what we've seen from him is consistent workload. And it hasn't amounted to anything yet. But again, I think if you look at the first 2 matchups for the Las Vegas Raiders, neither one of them has been particularly easy. The Patriots defense I don't think is that great. But last week versus the Chargers, it's no wonder he couldn't get anything going. This is a matchup they can take advantage of here, and I actually kind of expect the Raiders to win this game versus the Washington Commanders without Jaden Daniels. So I do consider him a good play and a better play than Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who definitely is solid. I will say that, I do think that they will absolutely use him as the feature back on the ground. But Jeremy McNichols is going to be flexible in this game because of the pass catching upside, and how they used him after Austin Eckler went down would indicate that he's going to be their main pass catching back and on third downs. So you can't rule out Jeremy McNichols, and that's the reason why Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt for me is lower than Ashton Genty. But no other running backs are viable in this game. I would say keep an eye on Chris Rodriguez's usage, and if he even is used in week 3, but I will say that you cannot put him anywhere near your starting lineup, and you really shouldn't have him rostered right now. So again, start some start-sit polls. It's completely free to do this, by the way, on FS Roundup. All you have to do is click on a player, start a poll. It's completely free, and get live updates on your poll results, and also help other people out as well and vote on their polls too. And if you want to get a full team breakdown from me that includes trade ideas, waiver wire acquisition ideas, and just ways to make your team overall better, you can get a full team breakdown from me when you join the premium subscription tier. And after the 12-day free trial is over, and when you become an official customer with us, I will break down your team for you personally in an email and on YouTube if you would like me to do that as well. Now, our next matchup is the Los Angeles Rams at the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is pretty obvious. Saquon Barkley obviously is a start. Kyren Williams is a start. I would say Blake Corum, keep your eye on him. The usage has been interesting, but right now I don't think that he's playable. I think Kyren Williams is the guy that you clearly want out of the backfield. It's a pretty easy situation. I don't think that either of these matchups are super high-end as far as scoring maybe, but I would say that you cannot put either of these guys on your bench. The Atlanta Falcons at the Carolina Panthers is relatively similar. Bijan has clearly been a dominant fantasy back this year, but Tyler Algier has had involvement. And for that reason, I would say in deeper leagues, he can be played. He's a decent dart throw at this point in time. So I do think that Tyler Algier is a player that you could probably play if you're in like a 14 or 16 team league, something like that. But if you're in a 12 team league, like the chances that you're playing Algier are very, very slim. So I would just keep it like that. Bijan clearly is must start, and Chuba I would also say is must start as well. I think Chuba Hubbard is in a position right now to where even though the last 2 weeks have been saved for him by a late touchdown that's receiving, I do still think that he's too important to the offense to overlook. I think Chuba's a must-start too, and Rico Dowdle just hasn't been involved enough yet.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast for the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh, no.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and rest easy this season. Huh. Look at him.
The Pittsburgh Steelers at the New England Patriots is our next matchup, and there's no must-starts. I will say this, though. Ramondre Stevenson, I like him a lot this week. He's probably one of my starts of the week at the running back position because this defense is atrocious. Pittsburgh's defense is awful, guys. It's truly terrible. So I think that you have to play Ramondre if you have him in a lot of situations because this guy, listen, I didn't like him at the beginning of the year. I thought Travion would get more work. But this is a slower moving coaching staff. They don't want to play the rookie right away over him. Ramondre has clearly been the lead guy through the first 2 weeks, and you can't overlook that. You got to play him over Jaylen Warren, who ironically does have his own upside because of the fact he's been a good pass catcher so far, and that's what keeps Jaylen Warren above Travion this week. But while I will say this, I think Travion could have a breakout week this week. All they have to do is give him more work, and he will light it up against the Steelers. I think Travion is a relatively high-end flex option this week. I really do. I think that he's a solid play. I would play Warren. I would play Stevenson over him. I would also play guys like Travis Etienne and Tony Pollard over him. But I would not rule out Travion Henderson this week. It definitely is going to be a week to watch for him in particular. The Green Bay Packers at the Cleveland Browns is our next matchup. And Josh Jacobs obviously is a must start. Chris Brooks is definitely one to keep an eye on just because he has been involved in certain passing situations. But I don't think that it's enough to take over for Josh Jacobs, especially for how this game is going to go, where the Browns are going to get crushed. And then I think this Cleveland backfield is still messy, but I will say this, the guy that you definitely want moving forward is Quinshon Judkins. Against my better judgment, I will say Quinshon Judkins should go in probably 70% of lineups this week. He will get the workload. He was used out of the backfield as a pass-catching back. So even when they're losing this game, he will see involvement in the pass-catching game. And I do think that Jerome Ford is probably the second best back in this backfield right now for fantasy, but Dylan Sampson's not far behind him. It's another messy week. I would not try to play either of the bottom two Cleveland backs if I could avoid those guys, but I will say they're playable over someone like a Tyler Algier maybe if you really wanted to take a shot on someone getting in the end zone or something like that. The New York Jets at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucky Irving is obviously a must-start guy. I think the matchup's really good, but Breece Hall, I do think is a relatively high-end flex play. I'd play him over Travion Henderson. I'd play Breece over somebody like Nick Chubb. I'd play him over Jeremy McNichols and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I do think that Breece Hall is a really solid play this week. I think the Bucs defense can be taken advantage of, and it's kind of becoming clear. While he's not handling the majority of the workload, and he's clearly the best guy, I do think that Breece Hall will continue to see more work because it just hasn't been effective with the other two guys. Breece looks good. So Breece, I do think, has a bounce back week this week in fantasy, and I think he's a relatively high-end guy. And I would play Rachaad White over the other two New York Jets backs. I do not like the Jets backs this week, except Breece Hall. I don't think Braylon or Isaiah Davis has looked good enough to put in a flex spot over Rachaad White, who actually looked good against the Houston Texans defense last week. He had involvement like I had predicted all offseason, and I do think that if that continues, the efficiency last week was very encouraging. So he's a lower tier flex option, but he is flexible nonetheless. The Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. This is a tricky one. There's no must-starts because there's no clear lead dog in either matchup. J.K. Dobbins, though, has surpassed Amarian Hampton as my favorite running back to play. And I got to tell you, Najee Harris is realistically not that far off from Amarian Hampton. J.K. Dobbins is clearly the lead back in Denver, and Denver's running backs are working well right now. Even against the Tennessee Titans, who I considered a tougher matchup in week one, J.K. Dobbins still got in the end zone because this offensive line is dominant over in Denver. So even against the Chargers, a tougher defense, they've got weaknesses up front particularly. So I do think J.K. Dobbins could take advantage. And Amarian Hampton, honestly, guys, last week when he fumbled, at a key moment in the game towards the end, I kind of knew that Najee Harris would get more work, and I think we're going to see that this week. So Najee is actually flexible this week. I think Amarian Hampton, there's trouble brewing for this one, and I would not want to play him over guys like Travion Henderson this week. I think Amarian Hampton, in a lot of situations, can find his way to my bench. But that being said, obviously, if you look at the first 2 weeks, the usage has been there to be at least flexible. And I would say that guys like R.J. Harvey and Tyler Bidet, keep an eye on him, continue to watch how this situation develops, but this week, I'll go ahead and put them on my bench. The New Orleans Saints at the Seattle Seahawks. This one's big because Alvin Kamara obviously is a must start. He's getting everything out of the backfield for the New Orleans Saints. But Kenneth Walker has leapt into must-start territory now that Zach Charbonnet is doubtful. He will not play in this game in all likelihood because of a foot injury that he sustained, I think, last week against the Steelers. So this is a matchup that I think Kenneth Walker could absolutely go off in. I think the New Orleans Saints defense is actually better than the Steelers, but still, Kenneth Walker with the backfield to himself, that's an appetizing thought. I like that thought, and I think that Kenneth Walker can find his way in 95% of my lineups this week. He's a must-start guy to me this week because of Zach Charbonnet being out, and obviously without Zach Charbonnet, neither of the other running backs in Seattle or New Orleans are viable in this matchup. The Dallas Cowboys at the Chicago Bears is our next matchup, and again, much like the other matchups we've been through lately, there's not a must-start in this backfield, while also acknowledging that two of them are very high-end flex options. Javonte is a very high-end flex, just based on the way he's played and the Bears' defense and how it looks lately. And the matchup, I think, could be very similar to last week, where Dallas was pouring on the points to the Giants, because their defense isn't good either. So I think that there's plenty of options in Dallas that you could play, along with Miles Sanders, who I consider a matchup-based flex option. Like, for example, if they were going up against a defense like the Green Bay Packers, I would not want to play Miles Sanders. But against the Bears defense and how bad they've looked, I would play Miles Sanders in a pinch sometimes. But I would play DeAndre Swift clearly over Miles Sanders. Swift came into the game questionable, but he's good to go. So Swift is going to play. He's continued to be the lead back. Kyle Monangai and Roschon Johnson are both pretty much irrelevant. DeAndre Swift and Javonte Williams are both really high-end flex options in a matchup that we could easily see a 50-point over-under. The Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers, and Christian McCaffrey. Good grief. I mean, the amount of times they use this guy is so crazy. Whether it's in the passing game or it's in the running game, Christian McCaffrey belongs nowhere near your bench as long as the guy is out there. James Conner and Trey Benson continues to be a true split. And I keep saying this, and I don't think people are listening. James Conner is in legitimate danger of losing his starting job. I'm not joking when I say that. Trey Benson's usage these past couple of weeks has indicated they like this guy a lot, and he's played better actually on a per-touch basis than James Conner has. So just because James Conner's gotten in the end zone the past 2 weeks doesn't mean that he's going to continue to be the lead back in Arizona. Trey Benson is right there. Keep a pin on this one. I am telling you, Trey Benson is almost just as flexible as James Conner is, particularly against the 49ers where this isn't a good matchup. I could easily see a world where Trey Benson is the better play this week than James Conner. Keep an eye on this one. And I will say, Brian Robinson Jr. has been more involved than I thought he would be, but not to the point where I think he's flexible. So I'd keep him out of this matchup. The Kansas City Chiefs at the New York Giants, which is our night game, Sunday night. And I think this one also is super messy as well. Cam Scatterboo has found his way towards the top of this matchup. He's my favorite option in this matchup. I'd play him before both Chiefs running backs because these Chiefs running backs, listen, I actually think there's utility there, but they just don't seem to have much interest in running the ball. So I think that Cam Scatterboo, based on the way he played last week, based on his usage as well, does deserve a spot as a relatively high-end flex option. He just narrowly missed my top 30 running back rankings this week, and it's not because I don't think the guy isn't a decent play. I think he can be played this week. And I would play him well over Tyrone Tracy Jr., who, again, last week, based on usage, started to lose favor. It's disappointing. I don't think he's a must-sit. I think he can be played potentially just based on matchup. I'm curious to see what the backfield looks like in usage-wise, but I do think that Cam Scatterboo is clearly becoming the favorite back in the New York Giants backfield these days. Bummer for me because I like Tyrone Tracy Jr. a lot coming into the year, but it's not working. So you have to consider other options better than him. And our Monday night game, the Detroit Lions at the Baltimore Ravens. You want options in this matchup. Point blank, end of story. Derrick Henry back in your lineup after a bad week last week. You want him back in there. Jahmyr Gibbs, while I have said I don't think this will be his best game, you're never going to sit Jahmyr Gibbs. You don't sit either one of these guys, but I prefer Derrick Henry because I think the Ravens are going to win this game, and I think they will put up a lot of points on the Detroit Lions. I think this one is high scoring, and it's to the point where last week you have to just look at it as kind of an anomaly. Like, nobody expected that game from Derrick Henry, but it happened. But you can't look at that and say, hey, listen, this guy is not going to be good moving forward. Derrick Henry goes back in your lineup. And I would say David Montgomery, just because of the matchup, is a relatively high-end flex option. But Justice Hill as well in the Baltimore backfield. Lower tier flex play, but in deeper leagues and in really desperate situations, can be played because, again, you want options in this matchup. So let me know what running backs you're riding with in Week 3 Fantasy Football. And if you want to see the top 30 running back rankings for this week, click on this video right here.